Welcome to Lawfully Chaotic.
I see Slabicus. You fix your camera, old man.
Unfortunately, Jason isn't able to join us tonight. So once again, we have to postpone the game system to... I'm just kidding. Jason, welcome back. No, I was just giving him shit because he finally reversed his fucking camera.
That night, try to get in the habit of setting my monitor correctly so it doesn't look like I'm like talking down to my shoes, but it's not. Because there's a monitor over here. There's one.
You know what?
Here.
That's kind of assumed that somebody always is looking not in their camera.
Because I want to look at you.
I get it.
The camera's like up here, so
I get it.
It's
but
always weird.
But your reversed type T-shirt bugged me more than you looking over here.
Oh well, in that case, let me put that back because now that I know it bugged you that bad, it needs.
Welcome, episode 23, Lawfully Chaotic. We are going to actually talk about game systems tonight.
The long-awaited title. It is now being discussed.
Yes. Well, we did not want to discuss that without you, Jason, because I know you have a ton, no joke, a ton to contribute to this conversation. So we just
mostly devil's advocacy because I find you two are so pleasant and well-deserving of everybody's passion. I'm just the cantankerous old gamer who pretends to love everything, and then I Karen and Kevin it all night long. Let's just be honest.
You know what? If there was no conflict, it wouldn't be a fun show, right?
It wouldn't be chaotic.
Exactly. Boom. See? Sharon, you get it.
She's so much better.
You just come on the show.
She's so much better at this than we are.
It's just awesome. No shit.
She's so much more. She's just a pleasant person compared to two old farts.
Yes, indeed. Announcements. I don't have any. Take it away. Anybody? Announcements. I got nothing. More of the same.
It's a little hard to do announcements because we're taking a break this weekend.
Okay.
We're enjoying the 4th of July, so we're going to be taking a 3-day.
That's right.
We're not running any games Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Everybody is being encouraged to take the 3-day break. Let's, barbecue, pool, swim.
Absolutely. And
considering the interesting 2 years we have, I think a little, we've had a significant uptick in COVID out in California.
Yep.
Yeah, same here. But you know what, to be honest, my son finally got it. He got his COVID badge last week. And had I not had the wherewithal to test him one morning because he was coughing a little bit more than his normal allergies,
right,
we would have never even known. He had 4 hours of mild symptoms. I mean, knock on wood.
Right.
And the rest of the week that he was home doing nothing, bored off his ass, he was completely fine. So maybe we're at the point where it's just seasonal bullshit that we're gonna have to deal with, hopefully.
Yeah. And I know one of the things it's affecting is the ability for people to get together and play games. So the online community is still available for that.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. But I did want to say that, yes, I just want to reiterate your sentiment. Happy 4th of July. Safe 4th of July while we celebrate America and going back to the Salem witch trials of the late 17th century.
Yeah, don't blow up any of your fingers, guys, okay?
Hopefully soon we will be...
I'm fine.
Hopefully soon we will be back to a complete Puritan society, and we can stop worrying about all of this equality and BS.
Oh, God, you know what?
Heavy sarcasm. If that wasn't
obvious. For the world to be on fire at this point?
Well, what's interesting is, me and Brian have been talking about a podcast about just topics of life, and I think we're gonna kick that off during the summer.
I got the URL. I've been sitting on it for 2 years, and I think now's the time. So yes, and we'll leave it at that for this show because
we're going to do that for the sake of, I think sometimes you just need to get things kind of like vented out and organized in your own mind, and organized from a perspective of conversation.
Yeah.
I have no opinions about the way the world's changing right now because it's not a unique situation. it's done it dozens of times before. And the real question is, what is the next generation going to do with it as they move forward to the next and the next and the next? I mean, the reality is we are of generation. We've studied our history. We live in a certain period of time. And then what is that roadmap going to look, for those that take up the mantle and continue forward? I will say this much. The only generation that has not done a very good job of that is both the baby boomer generation and the X-Geners, because we were so conflicted. We were such a conflicted generation with each other. It never occurred to us to look forward.
Well, not only that, but I think that is where we became so apathetic and self-centered and greedy. So there we go. I guess we're starting this other podcast because we have our first show.
So, by the way, Sharon, I have a lot of hope for you and your friends. Lots of hope.
Hopefully.
Yes.
But we're going to quash this conversation now because Lawfully Chaotic, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of
I did so much reading. I did so much reading.
Well, table it, because Lawfully Chaotic is owned by RPG&Co, which is owned by a multinational conglomerate with we can't get into that because of the whole brand thing. And
we signed an NDA before we started the show too, so
we're beholden to stakeholders and shareholders.
I have to sign an NDA every day called no dumbassery. So I understand. But I will.
A lot of holders. We have a lot of holders.
So I had a little downtime with my allergies, so I was doing a little extra reading. I am slightly hooked on this Blades in the Dark. I've been
so let's jump into our topic. Blades in the Dark.
So Sharon, lead us in.
Talk to us about. Lead us in.
Talk to us about your research and why we went with this topic.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about different types of game systems, whether it's tabletop, campaign long, or just like a one-shot, or even games that just deal with only one dice. So today we're going to be deep diving into some different genres into the tabletop world. So to kick us off, we are going to be starting off with some action fantasy games. And Jason hinted out to a system called Blades in the Dark, which takes place in a 19th century Victorian London. And it takes place when, Jason, what have you read about it so far?
I'm not going to have much to contribute to this particular game because I am a little bit ashamed to admit I have never heard of this system before. So.
Same here. Everyone's learning something new today.
And there you go, Governor.
I've always been a Cthulhu fan. And part of the game system of Cthulhu that I've always enjoyed was the madness system. And I know that can be a very kind of like difficult thing to implement because a lot of people will play games for the purposes of fantasy, relaxing, and stuff like that. So when you start dabbling in things like madness systems and
stress,
things that might actually introduce stress into a game, that's a very good way of putting it. Sharon.
Have you guys? And I don't want to derail, but have you guys played the board game Cthulhu: Death May Die by Simon Games?
No, not the board game. No.
Okay, we're gonna jump back. We're going to jump back to that after this.
Yeah.
So the thing that I liked about Blades in the Dark, their mechanics are incredibly simple. Very simple. But once again, I find any system that gives all the narrative back to the player to be good systems. Like they make sense. If you have Pathfinder level mechanics, D&D level mechanics, then you have Cortex, right? The thing that I love about these kind of independent systems, and by the way, Evil Hat Productions, great company. They put out a lot of really cool stuff. Yeah. I just like the fact that they're not actually Cthulhu, but it's that dark noir feeling.
Yeah, it's very gritty.
Yeah, and the characters matter more than the GM. I mean, this thing comes really close to a system that could run itself, and you might be able to just play the game as characters. the fact that you can play these dark, nuanced kind of characters, it embraces the anti-hero theme again, right? And I know in the D&D world, the very first attempt at that, like if you could find the character sheet, bring up the character sheet for me, Brian, since you're driving.
And for those of you that have just come in, we are talking about Blades in the Dark. This is a fast-paced one-shot system that just involves one 6-sided dice. You are part of a criminal syndicate, and you basically have to thieve and destroy and rise in infamy as the Blade in the Dark. So you take on characters such as thieves, smugglers, fighters, alchemists, mechanics. You have to make your name in the criminal underbelly of Duskfall?
Yeah, Duskfall. I think.
Duskfall.
Yeah, Duskfall.
This sounds really cool. As soon as you said 1d6,
right? That
my brain just exploded.
Yeah. And it's set as a fast-paced one-shot, but you can actually, make it into a campaign if you want. So that's why I thought this system was really cool, because it just deals with the one dice, and it's so completely different to the typical D&D hero, like, oh, I'm gonna save the world. No, you're an asshole that's gonna thieve and backstab everybody to make a big name for yourself.
It sounds like that this game is about the backstory and the canon more than the system, the mechanics.
Yeah.
Sharon, I mentioned to you when we were talking after last week's show about one of my favorite games. And again, I don't want to close the conversation on Blades in the Dark, but it sounds to me a little bit like Shadowrun, which is to this day still one of my favorite backstories and world mythos that I've ever read or played. But again, the mechanics were, yep, there you go. Ooh. I still have all my original Shadowrun stuff. The mechanics weren't horrible. They weren't great. That game was also based on a handful of D6. And given the depth of what you could do, so for those of you who are not familiar, Shadowrun was set in modern times. Corporations basically kind of rule the world. They have their own private security forces and armies and whatnot. Think Matrix meets D&D, because magic also sprang back to life.
Sci-fi, cyberpunk type
exactly.
of thing.
Cyberpunk meets D&D. People started to mutate back into orcs and elves and dwarves and trolls. They did a really, really awesome job of explaining this through the vehicle of the Native American nations.
Ooh.
And them kind of taking back what was rightfully theirs. So America was hugely fractured into the United Canadian and American States and the Confederated American States. And then most of America went back to the Native American nations, which I also thought was awesome.
I like that.
But anyway, it was set in Seattle, and it was exactly Cyberpunk meets D&D. So it was just a really, really
that's
awesome
actually a really
backstories.
good transition, because I think Blades in the Dark is a really good approach to that fast one-shot, simple dice mechanic, heavy character noir grit, and then just this really quick immersive way of playing a game. But then we think about sci-fi cyberpunk, Shadowrun. So Brian's rundown of Shadowrun. I was surprised at how interesting I thought Lasers and Feelings were. That was pretty funny. I was like, holy crap.
What's Lasers and Feelings?
That's where you're part of a spacefaring crew on the ship.
By the way, hello, Raptor. Paradox and Fatal Excrement.
Yeah, that's Gork. That's Gork from Saturday Nights.
Gork New York.
Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining.
So Laser and Feelings felt like an attempt at Firefly.
Really?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's not just a show?
No. But it was interesting. But of course, obviously, we have Call of Cthulhu, Dread, and what's...
But to play, I'll just close up the Shadowrun thing by saying again, to this day my favorite backstory because the breadth of what you could play. But and we played it for a good couple of years exclusively, and got a little bit tired of the limited mechanics, and therefore stopped. Yeah.
Well, I really like the focus of it being like cyberpunk, and also like just fighting back against corporations, because like, especially if you're like in America, corporations are just king here. So
yeah, the basis of the game was running corporate espionage missions.
Ooh,
so you'd have your rigger who went in, to jack into their security systems in the Matrix, and then you had your street samurais with wired reflexes and shit, and then your like street shaman who, the guy might be an orc and he's got magic. So it was really
so
fucking cool. But the biggest disconnect was trying to run somebody in a Matrix-like environment while the rest of the party, everybody hates fucking splitting the party up in a role-playing game. This was that to the nth degree, because of the story. But anyway, I'll shut up.
Yeah, well, no, Shadowrun sounds like a really great system, and I would definitely like to play.
It's worth picking up the core rule book just to read it. I mean, they got down so granular that they had, so the main game takes place in Seattle. Seattle is kind of like this free city that's independent, and they went so far as to like top-rated restaurants, your favorite orc cuisine and your favorite human cuisine, and they had dragons who were heads of corporations and stuff. It was just really
that's cool.
Well,
but that brings us back to a lot of things about when we talk about the different gaming systems.
Let me ask you a very pertinent question. When you say gaming system, do you think mythos or do you think mechanics?
I think pure mechanics.
Okay.
Pure mechanics. And there's a reason why my brain goes that route.
And I do the same.
My brain goes that route because clearly is a little bit not an appropriate word. When you look at games, there's essentially themes. Right? Sci-fi, Western, horror, noir, steampunk, medieval, high fantasy, low fantasy, stuff like that. So it's actually very true. A lot of the older versions, so for example, this is a second edition book. So a lot of this has been turned into PDF reality.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
But I will premise all that by something very interesting that I found.
Oh shit! You know what? I forgot. Damn it! I was in my garage yesterday, and I saw my old box of all my old source books for these fucking games from the '80s. I got to bring that up for the show, and I totally forgot.
Yeah, I want to share
show and tell.
I'm going to share a couple things because I kind of want to stipulate a point about mechanics because it's an interesting way. One of these days, I'll have a Bluetooth headset. I just don't like them. And there's
not for streaming. No, wired.
No, I know. But I do have a GURPS book around here, which I'd like to share with everyone, but I'll find it later.
Okay, now you make me want to get up and go to the garage and get all this freaking books, but I got to move one of the cars.
Well, while everyone's looking for books, let's
here we go. So,
I wish I had some elevator music, like for intermission.
So, this kind of lends into the conversation, right? So, I have no idea this system. I don't know what this is.
Never heard of it.
No one's ever heard of it. I've talked to so many. I found it in a bookstore.
Okay.
Maybe a year ago. It has never been opened. It smells brand new. I got it for $2.
Wow.
It's probably worth about $17,000.
I got it as part of somebody who just unloaded it as a set. Yep. So I have all 4 books, the dungeon screen. They call it the referee screen. So I've got the whole thing. But this is a good example of just because you think you built the best mechanics doesn't mean anyone's going to know about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but once again, I was inspired by the idea of the fantasy age theme that they were going with.
So you said you haven't read it. You don't know.
I've read a little bit of it, and it is pretty mechanically heavy. So I think that might have been part of the problem.
Okay.
But then I found a new box to curate. And I came across this.
Oh, I've still got that.
Oh, that
That's
looks
down
so
in that.
cool.
That's down in that box I was talking about.
Right. So I've got all 3 editions of this now because Larry is letting me curate his collection.
Mm-hmm.
A pretty heavy mechanic game.
Yeah.
Wow.
These could take hours to play. But the immersion effect of this theme, where you're in these huge gargantuan robots that are moving through the world, and you're having these intense battles with other people on the tabletop, it overcame the mechanics. Find where I'm going so far with this? Like, a lot of people do.
We tried.
A lot of people do this theme, right? A lot of people do this theme. Not many people do this theme.
Right.
Right. So you're willing to push through the mechanics that you have to learn. Now, the last time anybody tried to solve all the mechanic problems is with this.
Yep.
GURPS?
Yeah.
Right? The generic universal role-playing system.
Hero System also was...
I have that book as well.
Yeah.
So if we could come up with this, could you then not play any theme you've ever wanted to play? Therefore, are we now in a world that mechanics become less important and a single mechanic for 100 themes so we get closer to story and less worried about mechanics, right? This is the age-old... That's why I love the idea of this topic, because there are hundreds of mechanical systems out there, you know, both in physical copy and PDF copy, depending on how you choose to consume it. But I found, I was, as soon as you mentioned Shadowrun, I remembered in my mind, when we were supposed to meet last week, I had this idea of formulating, you know, this understanding, right? What if I could play a game that requires only 1 dice?
Yep.
Right? 1 dice mechanic. Right? Now, if you're a dice goblin, you're probably not going to like that. If you're a dice company that builds dice for a living, you're probably not going to like that. If you're a publisher, you're probably going to love it because it's probably going to be a lore-heavy world. So there's going to be a lot of really fun shit you can write, and people are really going to love it. But
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, because you definitely have a thought. So
like I was thinking, like, because you know how back in the day they had like the Choose Your Own Adventure storybooks.
Oh, I used to have them by the stacks. Yeah.
But integrate that with like just a dice. I think that would be really fun.
So it begs the question: do we still think that the only reason we use mechanics is because they introduce chaos, while everything else is organized and planned and thought out?
It depends. Okay, so it depends on. You bring up a very interesting point, and obviously GURPS is the king of trying to solve this issue.
Yeah.
Hero System. Hero System.
It's a great name.
Hero System. Well, it's like it's the generic universal role-playing system, right? Same thing with Torg, the other role-playing game.
Right.
I love Torg is one of my favorites too, just because that system wasn't necessarily, if I remember, that system was pretty light also, to the point of being constricting, constricticated. What I loved about
that is
Torg,
almost as funny as when Sharon said back in the day. Both those have me in hysterics inside my head.
Torg, what I loved about Torg, it was this like Worlds Collide, What If, Buckaroo Banzai amalgamation of every fucking theme you could want to play. Ancient Egypt, Victorian England, space lasers, superheroes, film noir. I don't think the system was there to back it up. Now, my view is with a game system is, and I guess it depends, Vampire Masquerade is a good example of a game where they tried to downplay the system as much as possible. The whole thing about that game was storytelling and playing a vampire, all right? Everybody getting together and basically playing vampire. I think a universal system is a great idea. I personally, though, like, anytime you say one die, I go into convulsions. Okay. I personally feel that a system, in order to be fully universal, a system has to have, there's a fine balance point between enough chaos and detail and rules without becoming bogged down in those things. Okay. And I don't know that 5e is the answer, but we've talked about the DC system. 5e is a pretty good base for something like that. I think we'll see how Spelljammer plays out. But I do think that the system has to have enough depth that you can develop a character and play to the mechanics of whatever theme you want, so that it doesn't just feel like, okay, we're just calling it medieval England and we're rolling a d6 whenever we need to do something. You know what I mean? There has to be, like, if I'm in a sci-fi spacefaring game, I want to be able to create a skill that is, rewire spaceship bulkhead doors, okay? And I want to be able to roll and do that and feel like I've accomplished something. If I'm in D&D, I want to be, stealthing up castle stairs, all right?
Right.
So in my opinion, and you guys may have a different view, in my opinion, it does have to be a deep enough mechanic system to be able to really fully enjoy the rest of that stuff. If not, I mean, you could all just sit around and play storytelling, and I'm not knocking that. That could be a very good thing. But then why do you have a character sheet at all? You might as well just all sit around in a room and just literally talk through, like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And have a referee that makes the decisions on the fly.
Right.
So I'd be curious to hear both of your opinions on the depth of the mechanics in terms of how involved it is.
Well, I'd like to hear about Sharon's opinion from her character depth, because I still think the main point of a game, if you play it this way, right? Now that we're cutting our teeth on now that we're cutting our teeth on one of the more specific questions, which is, are you playing a board game? Are you playing an RP game? Are you playing a TTRPG game? Right. Are you playing a tabletop war game? Right? So once you settle on the type of game you're playing in that game world, if you're going to be a player, Sharon, like a player character, what are you looking for?
Well, to circle back to what Brian was talking about, the different mechanics, most of these these systems that I have listed, they are designed in such a way where it is just a one-shot session. I think it would bog down the mechanics if they were to extend it further. I think maybe to introduce 5e well, I'm not sure if it's possible to introduce 5e mechanics on a one dice game for Blades in the Dark or something. Because
they tried it once before, which is interesting. They tried it with the D20 system, is what they tried to accomplish. They tried to minimize or organize it in such a way that, if you just roll D20s, you can resolve a lot of your playing mechanics. But if you're a player versus somebody guiding the players through a game, you're going to have such unique perspectives on the mechanics of a game that the guide sees the mechanics as a way to tell the story and but then expect the characters to react accordingly to it.
Right.
Whereas the characters may say, okay, I know I've got a big old sword or a pistol or laser beam eyes or whatever I'm immersing myself in, where I sometimes find the characters get a little bit frustrated. How could laser beams only do 2 points of damage?
See, right? And I think that's where my mind is, and I know this is an age-old argument, especially nowadays with D&D having become so mainstream, and the depth of character stories that we see being so much deeper than when we were kids playing this. It's like some people feel that mechanics take away from your ability to develop character stories. I disagree. I feel that character stories and backgrounds and character development can be separate from the mechanics. You can go as deep as you want on that. I guess where I feel the mechanics come in is, in addition to having my unique character story, I want to be able to, based on, it's a game. We're playing a game based on a system. So I want to be able to take advantage of my character's abilities in a way that feels different from everybody else at the table.
Right.
And that's why I feel like there has to be a certain amount of granularity so that when I make a specific skill check, I feel like I'm actually accomplishing something and not everybody at the table. Like, one of the things I hate at the table in D&D is like, okay, the DM is speaking to the party and somebody is checking at a door. Okay, make a perception check. And everybody says, oh, I make a perception check too.
Right. You don't
right?
teamwork,
it's
right?
like, I don't care if you have a +6. I'm talking to this guy and he's got a +1, but he's the one listening to the door. So let him do it and fuck it up. So I feel that the mechanics allow for more differentiation in player characters. And to me, as a player, that is what interests me in a game. I want to be different from everybody else at the table, beyond just my backstory.
Well, it's more like you're getting a more personal involvement into the world via mechanics.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Sharon, really quick, because I want to get your opinion on this. When you were building Mira, like when you went through the process of building your druid and then organizing the backstory for her, did the ability stats ever come into play other than the core mechanic of you being a druid? Like, you know what I mean? Like when you were rolling your skill sets and organizing your feats and your abilities and organizing the kind of mechanical skeleton of Mira, did it ever matter to you when you were doing that? Or was the story something that mattered more? So as long as the mechanics got you close to it, you were, you know what I'm getting at? Like that idea,
Yeah, and the thing is too, like I was leaning more on her background at first, and then when I started to progress in the game, that's when I started to think about like her abilities more, because then like it's a part of her, and she would have the amount of experience that she has because of the person that she is. So she's even really clumsy.
And see that can be a beautiful thing in both your character story and your mechanics.
Yeah.
You could, we're kind of getting into the min-max versus not discussion. So as much as I love mechanics, I am not a min-maxer. I like creating characters based on a story about what I want to play. And if that is completely contrary to the proper way to build a character within said system, I don't care. Once I have that character built, though, then I want to take advantage of the mechanics to the best of my ability. And it could be a really fun thing to say, hey, every third action that I take, I have to roll a d20, and on a 1, I trip over my own feet, and because I'm clumsy as shit.
And something I find interesting too, because I know me and Sharon have talked about this before, but the cultural influences around you and those relationships with a possible game mechanic. Like I've really fallen in love with the board game Castle Siege, right? It's a lot of fun. It's random. It's a cooperative game, right? So the cooperative nature of it is a lot of fun. The mechanics can be both scary and simplistic at the same time. So like when I think about the uniqueness of cooperative play, right, and its relationship to mechanics, it kind of reminds me of the topic that Sharon touched on, which is like the cuteness factor of a game, right? The idea, sometimes you want to play a game that's just funny or kind of like, it's so adorable it makes your teeth crack, or it's just silly, or when we did our one shot with the Greying Lands one time, it was a Feywild one shot.
Oh.
And they were playing characters that were about to go on an adventure that were watching their alternate characters land into a mysterious town. So they were from the town, but they were riding unicorns and they had cotton candy weapons and they had snow cone wands and they just built
bazookas.
these
So
bazooka
so
glitter.
in that vein right there, like say you were you running that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
so
awesome.
It was fun.
So as a DM, my mind immediately goes to, as a DM, okay, you're rolling the Feywild. So every hour, I'm going to roll on the wild magic chart, and somebody is going to turn blue or whatever.
Or whatever the result is, yeah.
Now, somebody, some people might say, as a DM, I'm just going to decide when the time is right for storytelling when that stuff happens. And I think a combination of the two is really great. But I guess what I'm getting at with dice... Really, I'm just a dice whore. That's the basis of this conversation. But I think
so much glitter.
what is I think what I love about not having to make those decisions myself all the time is just the randomness of it.
Yeah,
which I feel like that
chaos.
Gets us, I feel like that gets us to the core of the mechanic, reality. A lot of dice. Not so much dice. More character development, less character development. More, game guidance, referee guidance versus minimal referee guidance, right?
I would say that's a fair assessment.
But what's fascinating is one time I had a whole day to myself. I think Callista was off doing something. I was in the studio and I knew I had a lot of writing to do that I wanted to work on. I sat down and I said to myself, I'm going to write a single page gaming system. An entire gaming system written in a single page.
In 0.7 point type.
Right?
1 page, 28 million
And what
words.
it really forced me to do is think about how important mechanics really are. And what I found myself doing, just let the player decide that for themselves. Just let the player. I had like 35 asterisks that just said, let the player decide that for themselves. And I'm finding myself more and more, like we're experiencing with Pike's Promise on Mondays. I'm finding myself more and more getting out of the business of resolution of what they're doing. And just looking at my player and going, how do you think you would handle this? Explain it to me. And they describe what they do. And then I go, okay, let's talk about that. Give me this, this, and this. And then what do you think? This or this? And they might say, well, this sounds logical. And they do their rolls. And I go, okay, you had a partial success here, but you had an amazing failure here. Tell me how you feel like that failure is going to be. And then they narrate their own failure. Now, I definitely borrowed a lot of that from Shannon, who plays a lot of Mage. And Mage kind of narration and refereeing of people who play Mage. It's like, describe for me how you're trying to shoot the gun. Well, I prop it up on the car, and then as I aim across the hood, I just let a full burst of rounds go at the target. Okay, great. As you did that, you didn't realize the car had been running all day, and it's hot. So as you put your hand on the hood, go ahead and roll with disadvantage because you immediately are, distracted by the heat of the hood.
Okay, but you said something right there. I think that is beautiful. I love it. But you just said roll with disadvantage.
Right, but
I think the
roll
beauty
with disadvantage is a notation of risk versus reward.
Yeah,
right?
and I'm not arguing what you were saying because I think that narrative resolution.
But to your point, yeah, disadvantage versus advantage feels like a universal mechanic. You're right. Right. It feels like a universal mechanic. I would agree with that.
I think a beautifully written system of mechanics can incorporate both. It should not be so constrictive that you have to rely on a die roll and you can't narrate.
Correct.
But they should be able to play hand in hand. I love what you just said about the car's hot and you put your hand on there. So then
like
it changes your difficulty. Or
To me, the whole page, sorry, Cher, the whole page that I wrote, it boiled down to the introduction of mechanics based purely on risk and reward. When I got to the end of that single page, I looked at all my notes and I'm like, if I could come up with a mechanic system that clarified and codified the idea of risk versus reward, and that was a Unitarian system, I feel like you get to that point that you're trying to get to.
I just had a fabulous idea.
Hold on,
2 seconds, and then you should.
All right.
I'm gonna
wait.
all wrinkly by the time you guys are done.
All right, 7 seconds. You're using up my fucking time. I want to publish a game source book that's 200 pages long, and all of the pages are blank, and on the first page it says, "Do whatever the fuck you want."
That is chaos. What were your thoughts, Cher?
Oh no, I was just going to say that most tabletop games are very action heavy and very mechanics driven, but there are games out there where you don't even have to have dice, you don't even have to fight people. Like for example, Dread, for example, you're using a Jenga tower to play
I saw
the game.
Paradox. Yeah, that was awesome.
What is this?
Huh? You didn't take a look at it, Brian? That was part of your homework.
I know. What is it? It's called Dread.
Dread. So
it's an interesting take. Yeah, Cher.
It's a horror style tabletop RPG game where you use the Jenga tower. It's already terrifying as it is, but why not add a horror game to it? So for each basically each decision that you make in the game, say for example you're trying to hide from the murderer, okay, well then you're going to have to stealthily walk away from the guy. Okay, pull a block from the tower and see if you can make a success, and if you don't, well, the tower falls and the murderer gets you.
That's fucking ridiculous.
I love it. Cool.
That is fucking ridiculous.
But it really
interactive.
It really brings in the physical, kind of like the physical interactive that I think sometimes games lack. It's an over-exaggeration. Don't get me wrong.
It's
an over-exaggeration.
Here's your game kit, and it comes in a foot locker. What are you trying to do? Well, I want to stealth on this tightrope. Okay, here's a rope. Go tie it to that banister and that doorknob and walk on the fucking tightrope. That's ridiculous. I'm going to say it. That's fucking ridiculous.
Your palms are already sweaty from playing Jenga anyways. You might as well get scared while doing it.
Well, I think it's also really interesting mechanical way of introducing people to gameplay without them feeling like that. You know what I mean?
Extremely creative.
It's I play this when I go drinking with my friends. This is easy.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, if you pull the wrong block, you and the party die. Oh, yeah. Well, that's different. Yeah. You didn't tell me that.
That is extremely creative, and I can see that being a ton of fun. But I still think it's fucking ridiculous.
And to the point of...
And of course, now I'm going to go and buy the damn thing.
And what prompted me to think about this whole game mechanic thing when we were talking about it before is, what if... This is a big what if, right? What if you get a table of people together and you say, okay, what do you want to play? And they all look at each other and go, well, can we do something sci-fi? Sure. What do you want to do? You start talking about that. And you say, okay, great. How do you think the characters should go? Should they be built a certain way? Should you have classes? Should you have the idea of identifiers? Should you be kind of identified as a certain kind of player? What are your thoughts? What if you could develop a game that is so kind of driven through just the nature of the vibe of the table, that whatever it becomes just becomes that game for that table?
And again, I think that's fantastic. They're still...
They could all agree that they want to use 25 different dice.
Yeah.
right? They could all agree
Leave
that
it
they
out.
want to do well. Hey, they could all look at me and go, "Hey, Jason, we're all kind of console gamers. Can we do skill sets? Can we do like skill trees?" Right? So kind of what you've been
So
working on in the past, Brian, where you have
yeah.
these layered skill things to kind of give you those extra edges as you move through the world.
So we're coming full circle because what you're talking about is a universal system that can apply to anything.
No, it's even worse than that. What I'm talking about is no system exists until the table starts playing.
Okay, but then basically you have to come up with a system and create one or find one.
Exactly. What if that's the missing link? What if the great hereditary challenge of any table lasting a progressively long time is that it's a lot of round pegs trying to find the right holes to fit into?
Okay, but wouldn't a truly universal game system that had awesome mechanics, wouldn't that fulfill that role?
No, because the mechanics are still predefined.
So
This is
you
a
just want an
holistic
on-the-spot
approach.
game.
This
But
is
you're
a
talking
very-
okay, but what I'm hearing is, hey, what do you guys want to play tonight? Let's play sci-fi. Okay,
So
now
really
we got to sit around.
what all you are hearing right now is Brian's trying to figure out how can I publish rules if I don't know what they are.
No, what I'm hearing is, great, let's play sci-fi. Now we got to fucking spend the next 47 hours writing rules for this game.
Well, what if it turns out that the table only cares about 10% of what a book is written to?
Then
And that
I mean,
10%
that's
they're
fine.
not really overly...
Then you're back to like Vampire the Masquerade, where the
Are
system
we?
doesn't really matter and it's all about narrative.
What if they agree that a D100 is a great way to determine fate? Maybe they want to come up with a fate rule, but at the same time, maybe they want
but
a
what you're
skill
saying
tree.
is you have to create a rule system on the fly.
Yeah, sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, you guys want to play a game tonight? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Engineer this fucking game for the next
Yeah, let's do it.
12 hours.
Oh, you want to be someone who's good at assassin? You want to you want to be a
Hey,
brewer? You want to be
we-
an alchemist? You want
When
to
I
be
was
like
a kid, we spent entire nights and entire sessions doing nothing but creating characters for
Oh.
multiple fucking weeks. So I'm not knocking like, oh, let's create this. The thought of creating this this customized thing is great to me, but I guess I'm still thinking of the mind. I'm still in the mindset of if you had a truly, really well written, not too deep, but just deep enough, all encompassing universal game system, then you should be able to meld that into whatever the players want to play that night.
And usually that's what ends up happening. It's just it's an interesting way to look at the most common problem of any game that's trying to get going, which is how do we get that table vibe established? Well, if there's a kind of, agreement on the mechanic, is that enough to keep the table going? Well, sure. Once you have an agreement on a mechanic, you have a druid, you have a dwarven pirate, you have a crazy barbarian, and they're in a cyberpunk world where a mad mage on top of an iron tower is using the iron tower to suppress the populace, and this group has got to figure out a way into the tower and save the populace from this insane mage. And it turns out the mage's name is CPU, and suddenly dealing with this mage is dealing with an AI. And do we have the right kind of like mechanics to kind of like enforce those AI potential mechanics? And suddenly you're in the multiverse because the AI expands you out into 2,000 possibilities of what might happen.
I want to play that theme right there with the rules from Stratego. Make that for me.
Right? I mean, at some point, I agree. It's one of the reasons why I like 5e mechanics so much is I can take GURPS lore, I could take 5e DC core system, I could take Mage and Vampire the Masquerade character construction with their Cthulhu-based lore, and then take some Shadowrun corporate cyberpunk theme, and boom, you're off and running in the game.
Yeah, but it's
You know what I
still,
mean?
it's yes, totally. I agree. But I guess my point is it's still, unless you're playing completely narrative, it's still based on a system. What dice, or how do I figure out if
partly
I
based on 8 system. Maybe that's
how do
another.
I
What do
figure
you
out if I
guys think?
accomplished this or not? What'd you say?
I said, chat. What do you guys think? Do you think
Poor
it should
Sharon.
be a
Poor Sharon.
universal?
We've been just spouting off for like 40 fucking minutes.
I'm just a wallflower.
Let me ask
Well,
you this. Seriously.
I like
Is there
this
ever
I
a
want to
time
squeeze in
is
the cuteness games before we sign off, guys.
Which
Because
we
there's a lot
will.
of like.
If we got to run a
mechanics
little
and
over for
guns
oh, this
involved.
show's
Sharon, if
going
we gotta run
longer
a
than
little
8
over
o'clock.
for cuteness, we will. I assure you.
Or whatever. Yeah.
If you could dumb down basic archetypes, but have them open to expansion and interpretation from there. I think that's becoming a much more common theme these days.
Yes.
The idea
Now, but is that expanding the interpretation wholly based on backstory, or is it expanding the interpretation based on a system of mechanics with set skills that differentiates that character's subtype?
Did either of you watch the new Critical Role, The Story of Sprinkles?
No, not yet. Don't fucking
On and
ruin it
off.
for me.
Yeah, that's a really good example of the cuteness factor that we're about to transition to, while also answering Brian's question. I really felt like their most recent episode was pure backstory enlightenment. Like,
Yeah.
where did Sprinkles come from and where did Sprinkles go?
Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not against backstory and narrative roleplay.
But he is against cuteness, so goodbye. Anyway,
cuteness sucks. Fuck cuteness. Fuck your Sprinkle. No, I am very, very much into narrative role playing. I still enjoy the shopping episodes of Critical Role more than anything else. If a die is never rolled during a session, I'm okay with that. But when it comes to, can I hack this guy's head off with my axe or shoot his eye out with my laser gun? I want a fucking die to roll, you know? Let me ask you a question, though. Are there ever times where you guys, because, so I don't know if you know this, but the and in RPG and Company, when I was developing this brand, I originally developed RPG Inc. And right before I bought the URL and applied for the trademark, I thought, you know what, that's going to pigeonhole me into just role-playing games, and I don't want to do that because I have a very big love of board games. So that's why I changed it to and Company. It's a very subtle branding thing. That's another show though. So in that vein, is there ever a time that you get together with a group of friends and you're like, oh, we want to play something immersive, but we don't necessarily want to role play tonight? What board game can we play that still has an immersive backstory, whether it's cute or whether it's Cthulhu, madness and stress or whatnot, and let's play that board game tonight instead of a role-playing game? Because I do find that from time to time, and that's why I wanted to bring up Cthulhu Death May Die.
Well, the only other game I've played besides D&D that involves cooperation, I mean, it's still D&D. It's a board
Finally,
game
we pissed Jason off enough that he just left.
And it's Temple of Elemental Evil. So you get to have minis, you get to have tiles, and it's all randomized, and you still get to roll a d20, but you're still playing a game where you have to roll to disable traps. You're rolling to fight enemies in the game. So it's not anything that has to do with lore or anything. There's like a little snippet, but
yeah,
it's essentially combat.
So Cthulhu Death May Die, and I like that. And Death May Die by Simon Games is very cool. It's a Warhammer, for fuck's sake. Don't fucking get me started on Warhammer. Cthulhu is an awesome game because it is based on madness and insanity, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the way you lose the game more often than just dying is you go insane. And they just did the artwork, the feel of the game. Yes, that's another good one. Betrayal at House on the Hill. Yes, it's a really immersive board game, and if you play it right, or if you play it in a certain way, I should say, you can really set a mood. BattleTech we played that's Matt. Yeah, we played, God, how many fucking nights did we play BattleTech? But I find it interesting because with the right board game, I feel you can still set a mood and have some of that immersion without having to have the heavy aspect of role playing that sometimes, quite frankly, you just don't want to do.
So you have zombie
What is that?
dice.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, I
Right?
love zombies. What's that?
Then you have spite and malice.
What?
That I haven't heard of.
And then, of course, you have joking hazard, right?
Yes.
So I think the idea, which you both set up perfectly, is what are you in the mood to play?
Yeah.
It's all about the mood. You want to put together, cool Warhammer army and just go at it all night? Do you want to bring out Jenners and Atlases, go at it in a sci-fi kind of like, one-shot adventure without a whole lot of RP, but a lot of mechanics?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to sit down and play a board game? Do you want to sit down and play a really heavy RP game? I think we keep coming back to the number one challenge that all mechanics have.
What do you feel like playing?
What do you feel like playing?
Yeah.
Like, and should you feel just wonderfully lucky that you're amongst a group of people that feel the same way? What do you feel like playing? You want to play a little Dark Tower? Their Kickstarter was amazing.
Yeah, I have it. It's awesome.
Yeah,
a Warhammer RPG, that would be fucking interesting as shit.
Well, we do have one. Didn't they make that with it's the one with the barbarian, the Mohawk troll on the front of it? It was called Warhammer RPG.
Oh. Yeah, I guess there was a reason it failed. It probably cost $75,000.
Oh my God, here he
I
goes.
just remembered.
Here he goes.
I just remembered Munchkins is also a fun
Munchkins.
card
Oh,
game.
Munchkins
You're
is
absolutely
awesome.
I
right.
love
Munchkins
it.
is an amazing
Yeah.
game to play.
Yeah. So
and-
along these lines, do you ever feel like you're sitting at the table and you say, what do you guys want to play tonight? Well, we want something a little bit light, but we still want to have some fun. We don't want to play a role-playing game because we don't want to deal with the heavy mechanics.
Legendary Toaster.
Toaster.
It's such a 40K reference.
So, like for tabletop games, it's kind of like a pick your flavor type of setting, isn't it? It's like 21
It really is.
flavors.
Well, I meant if your group is like, do we want to play a role-playing game? Do we not want to think that hard? Does the mechanics of the role-playing game ever affect the decision? Like, yeah, we'd like to play a role-playing game tonight, but we don't want to create characters and deal with the mechanics and yada yada yada.
Right. Well,
Which is what is so great, though, isn't it? Like you're just picking up a character and then just rolling with it for the night, and whatever happens.
That's true. Which can also be a ton of fun.
yeah.
Here's your character, one that you would never have otherwise created.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I like the Avray bot so much. Like my favorite one shots to run are to let everybody, hey, when you go in the one shot channel, do the exclamation random char. So it's a random character build.
Mhm.
And whatever you get is what you play with.
Ooh, that's fun.
Which, just rolling with. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Actually, that'd be a good name. That would be a good name for a game. Just roll
Yeah.
with it.
just
for
roll with it.
For a universal game.
Yeah, I love. Ooh.
Trademarked dibs.
Oh,
Motherfucker. Well, you could do the publication. I'll do the rule writing. Just roll with it. And you know what would fucking be so much fun to do with that? I just popped in my head. Let's create some new dice.
Dibs, trademark.
Let's create a D15. Let's create a D30.
I want a
let's-
trapezoidal
why not just do
die
letters instead?
that won't
or
even
Roman
land on
numerals?
any.
Well,
it lands on
and-
nothing but 1 and 17.
And Torchseer brought up a good point earlier, fate cards. What
Yeah.
if you get out of the business of dice? Does a game get more mechanically interesting when you use fate cards instead of dice?
Why not both?
Or possibly both. Yeah.
I mean,
if
look at my homebrew. All of my homebrew is pretty high level for D&D. It's pretty high level shit, but it's all got caveats. Like use this too much and X happens. I love that type of shit. I love the random factor. I love that. I mean, to me, a game that used cards and dice would be, even if it was dice and a deck of 52 playing cards.
yeah.
And that's how some people actually play D&D is with a deck of cards. And then
I
like
think
the thing
that's
is,
fucking
too,
awesome.
And the thing is, too, now that I think about it, like, dude, like the deck of many things, it's a card game within a dice game.
Like a tarot deck.
Like, come on.
Yeah. So
Well,
that's why I say that when the rules are easy, that's why I feel like when the rules are easy enough to apply to any system, but yet still have an amount of detail to them where you can introduce in a specific situation a little bit of chaos and a little bit of randomness. I think that is, to me, that's an interesting game.
So on that note, let's talk about really quick an example of the most mechanically heavy game ever written in the history of humankind.
Ever?
Shit! Wait! Oh,
What?
why does that not surprise me? That's
What
a fucking
is
Star Trek.
that?
Right?
I think that's
Wait,
so cool.
how thick is that book? Hold up the
I
side.
mean, it's
Wow, that's dense.
Jesus Christ! It even looks like a
It's-
fucking Starfleet manual.
this is part of Larry's collection that I've been allowed to curate, and he's got about 50 books related to this.
Jesus.
Cool.
But it's a really good example of generational movement away from like the interpretation of gameplay and having
Mhm.
multiple generations through cultural influence
Mm-hmm.
begin to design the idea of gameplay, right? Could you have as much fun playing this or this? Well, they're both equal measures of possible fun depending on the group that you're playing with.
What is
So if you circle back to the idea of mechanics, it does make sense. No matter what, every game that you play is going to have its own mechanic and kind of its own system, no matter what you play, right? You're going
Mhm.
to have to learn the nuance of the way their rules come into effect, right? But it all really boils down to, can you have fun playing any game with anyone at a table? I mean, that is the great kind of like grail of like, you have a group of 5 friends, you from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m., you order pizza, beer, and you sit around a table and play 12 different games,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Wow.
So it's just like, that's always my encouragement for folks. It's like, sure, we're talking about mechanics today, but had I never really gotten involved with being a professional DM, I never would have met Sharon. I never would have met Brian. So yes, game mechanics are important to how we think we're about to play a game, but remember everybody around the table. Remember the journey that you went on to meet each one of those folks, and
Mm-hmm.
remember the fun that you're having. Don't worry about rolling really shitty. If you got the Will Wheaton curse, don't worry about it. You're gonna have a slice of pizza and you're gonna move on to the next game.
But
And you're
the
just
Will
with your-
Wheaton curse was so much fun. To your point,
And there's the
alive
F
and well
word.
and-
there's no such thing. It's not about winning or playing right. You're right. It's about having fun. And I love World War II games. I love colonial games. Squad leader.
I love Catan.
Talk about
I
fucking
love-
rules heavy.
A
Remember
lot
those-
of people probably don't know this, but the creator of D&D, his favorite game was to play Gettysburg. Him and his friends from Friday till Monday would play Gettysburg tabletop all weekend long, and D&D came out of that in the sense they said, well, what are our captains, majors, sergeants, and lieutenants doing in between wars? What if we
wait
could
a
come
second.
up with a way
This
of,
was- This was one of our trivia questions, which
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately we forgot to write new ones for this week. But what
Yeah.
was the game that D&D was born out of? This is for you, Jason.
Well, I know, I know based on the readings of the documentaries I've consumed, I know they based the idea of D&D from playing Avalon Hill's Gettysburg.
No, but what directly was D&D born out of? A game created by Gygax.
It wasn't Darkmoor, was it?
Nope.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was a tabletop miniature war game called Chainmail.
Oh yeah, chainmail. Yep.
Yeah,
No,
and
you're
D&D
absolutely
was
right. Yep.
created to provide some more depth to those character backgrounds, and it became its own thing, and
I
eventually
missed a step in my memory when they
Yeah.
were wondering what their captains and lieutenants were doing. It led to chainmail. Chainmail led to D&D.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct.
Paradox
That's a good trivia
wins.
question.
Paradox, you win some RPG and Company stickers.
Yeah, I was thinking Blackmore, Darkmore. Blackmore was actually the unofficial first world/campaign for D&D. A lot of people argue about it because there's not a lot of Arneson fans out there. So Arneson wrote Blackmore, and a group of 12 people played Blackmore for decades after the introduction of chainmail that then eventually became the first series of D&D. So yeah, the gearheads are in charge right now, Sharon. Sorry. She's just like, God, old men.
Totally.
So I guess
old men and their
we
nostalgia.
totally started off with talking about game systems. Now we're just totally talking about mechanics. So
I know. I have to mention this though. In response to your statement about can you have fun? That obviously depends on your group, depends on the night, depends on the mood. Sometimes you're right. Like, I want to play the simplest game. I want to roll 6 dice and zombie dice and play 47 games inside of an hour and a half. That's and drink beer. That's fun. There was a game that we used to play when we were way back when called Centurion, and then there was a space flight game based on this also, and Interceptor.
That's for you,
Interceptor.
Sharon. Warm brain.
See, I love it. Centurion and Interceptor. They were tabletop war games. One was futuristic tanks, and one was space fighters. The cool thing about the game was I think an electrical engineer probably designed these games. I don't know. I should find out. But the critical charts for your tanks or your ships were literally electronic diagrams. Is that Ogre I see? Yeah.
I'm going to out old man you, old man.
I remember Ogre.
Sharon's like, oh my God.
I'm just in the corner fending for my life.
Yeah. The critical charts on these games, when you would get a hit, it was literally an electronics diagram, and you would go through that
sounds terrifying.
It was so much fucking fun. It would take like 40 minutes to resolve one hit because you'd have to trace through the diagram and find out what systems it affected in the ship.
So I have a question for Sharon. If you could turn any theme into a game, what would it be?
Corporate office job.
Anything? Oh my God, I'm already playing that game in IRL. It's dreary as hell, let me tell you.
It's a horror game.
Yeah.
Anything.
Corporate Doom.
Corporate Doom. Oh my
Trademark.
God. Dibs, trademark. God damn it.
I just thought of a wonderful game to play.
Wait, no, I want to hear Sharon's answer, actually.
I know, right?
I just broke
anything.
I think she broke something. Because she laughed so hard, the whole table shook.
All right. What was the question? I was crisis
What?
averting.
any like theme or cultural inspiration? What would you turn that? What game would that look like to you? Like anything that you like, this golden opportunity that you only have to think about your favorite thing to play.
Actually, I want all of us to answer this. Sharon, you first.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed when we played that one shot for the Feywild. Like, if I could play a game like that, I think that'd be so much fun because, the fact that you also introduced the idea of having everybody create their own weapons, I thought was so cool because, it created mystery between the players because, what are they gonna make? I think that was really fun to do, and plus, it it was lighthearted but also combat heavy to the point where like you were still engaged and like everybody was just having fun at the table. So if I were to create a game, it would be something along the lines of that. Glitters and bazookas.
Yeah. I love it. Brian, you?
I really love the multiversal what if kind of theme. Not necessarily multiple. Oh yeah, I guess it would be multiple dimensions. But I really love the mashup of different themes, kind of set in a 1930s noir basis. I'd like to see that.
I want to play a game called The Librarians. I do. I love the idea of
Please elaborate on that.
You live in a modern time, and there's this entire 250,000-year history of a species behind you. And the idea of manipulating time and incurring the threat of altering pasts and futures related to the ultimate decision of, you go back and kill Mussolini? Do you go back and do this? And do you go back and do this? And what happens to the timeline? What is this extravagant lore that plays out? You know, do you come back to a world in complete annihilation? Because
butterfly effect. Times a billion.
I love the idea of playing a game where you have a fun mechanic involved in it, but it's very much driven by the narrative of you're making those hard choices of changing time for what you think is the benefit of a better future. And then you use like a tarot deck solution that as soon as you try to alter a timeline, you have to pull over that card, and that card determines the butterfly effect.
Dibs trademark.
The future. You know what? And
I think your idea actually wins, and I actually really want to fucking play that game a lot.
Well, now to like kind of like hightail off of that, like I had such a cool idea of like you know how the Library of Alexandria, like, you know, it's lost the annals of time or whatever, but I thought it would be really cool if it was like a mage school, you know, and like a angry mage just got
narrative based,
like,
make it storyteller. Fuck that, it needs dice.
And like, you know, one of the mages rebels against like the headmaster, and that's what causes the siege at like the Library of Alexandria. And like there are like rogue mages trying to save all of the books from the library, so they're like casting like small on the books to just cram it in as much as they can and then just flee. And you know, your quest is to like basically preserve the knowledge, but also try and make sure that it's preserved.
The hero's journey. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Paradox. The storyteller system does have lots of details.
Lots of details.
That's only one die.
Technically two.
One type of die.
Oh, gosh darn it.
I want to change my answer. I want to create a game where you are playing players who are playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh no. Oh.
There's a great film that was actually made. There was what's her name's group, the Guild, right? There was the Guild. And then there was another I have the DVD around here somewhere, but there was this great game where or this movie about these players who were playing players. And it was fun to watch the tropey, good-looking guy that wanted to play, but he was always physically a stand-in, and his name was Mark. So as they played the game at the table, there was a cutaway from them playing, and they're actually cosplaying out there. You know, it's a lot like Deer Productions or whatever, that one group that does like the really fun shit in Australia. And so whenever they'd look at the empty chair at the table and then go to role play it, cosplay it, it would just be Mark dressed up like a fighter and He'd just stand there like this while they were all fighting. And then they go, "Oh man, where's Mark? He's on a date with his girlfriend." And all the other 4 guys would go, "Ew, that's so gross."
That's awesome.
Wait, are you talking about All for One?
Yes, All for One is another
Yeah.
one.
Oh,
that I
they're so good.
Yeah, they're hysterical. My favorite one was they hit 1 million views on Bardic Inspiration. That is just, and it's him singing about Bardic Inspiration and what it means to be an inspiring bard, and he's covered in blood at the end, and he's just like, it's just their shit is ridiculous, but it's ridiculously intentionally ridiculous, which is why I love it so much.
That's awesome.
Well, let's all get to work on those games.
Players play.
I kind of feel like we need to actually write a game.
It would be fun, wouldn't it?
It would be. I really am digging that librarian idea, to be honest with you. All kidding aside, I really want to play that. If I saw that on the shelf, I'd be like,
a Doctor Who role-playing game. So what are we thinking for our next subject matter next time? What are our thoughts? Have we tackled the conversation about pop culture influence yet? Have we talked about the corporate influence or the, what does it mean to actually call yourself a dice goblin? Does that mean something these days? I mean, Sharon, I think you're due for a topic. I picked the last one. I think you're due for one.
I don't know what to choose.
Come on. This is your thing.
Yeah, you're good at this. We're terrible at it.
Chat, you want to give some ideas? I would be happy to hear them. Railroading 101.
I think we've kind of talked about that. I do kind of like the pop culture / corporate influence. That would be a good one.
Might be a little too serious though. Harumph, 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 harumph. Gentlemen, harumph.
Corporate. Well, we certainly don't need to think of it right now. If anybody in chat,
no.
Do we want to just think of it with our brains, or do we want to roll dice, or do we want to pick a card to determine what it is?
Roll dice. Rollies.
How to steal a movie plot 102. Making magic items.
But we touched on that last time, didn't we? Didn't we? Creating
or the social influences of D&D in a modern day.
Oh, I like that. I love that.
How about just,
do you have a dice that says right foot or chest or full body or right hand? Ooh.
Chat look away.
Reskinning 5e for other genres. Well, that's kind of what we've talked about, but that's
a little bit.
We could go deeper into that. How about just how the perception of D&D has changed over the years and how it has become? I'm still amazed at how mainstream it's become and what those factors.
The cultural influences of playing D&D.
Boom, there you go.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Next week, cultural influences of playing D&D.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Whoa! Damn it! Did you not get the memo?
I almost got out of this.
What's the matter? You got a fucking appointment or something? All right, we don't have any more trivia because we did not re-roll. But Paradox, you answered the one question, so send me your info, DM me, and I will actually send you some stickers and shit. Not an actual bag of shit. That would be great.
That would be pretty funny though. Here's some RPG&Co steaming shit.
Flaming bag of shit.
We're gonna do rollies to see who closes out the show, Jason.
Damn, I almost got out of it.
Let me just insert the cute games really quick. Check out Golden Sky Stories. It's really super cute. You play a animal called a henge, and it's basically like My Neighbor Totoro. Go check it out. And also Honey Heist, where you play cute bears and you wear cute hats. Yeah.
Familiar with Honey Heist? What's the other one? Golden Sky Story?
Yes, Golden Sky Stories. It's a heartwarming RPG. There's no action involved. It's, it's basically a sweet story about, just helping out people in your village.
Okay,
Well,
awesome.
check it out.
Yeah.
But so Sharon, since Jason and I basically fucking just spouted off the entire time, you get to
Jesus.
roll rollies with advantage.
Oh, all right, all
How's
right.
that for game system mechanics?
Wait, but okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
Wait, we're gonna roll together. So
yeah,
come on,
but
guys.
you roll with advantage.
Yes.
So you roll
but
2d20.
Yes. All right. I got a 2.
I got a 15.
I got a 12 and a 13.
All right. Jason, close us out.
Barry
Got
Bott,
it.
where can we find you these days?
You can find me at Instagram at BarryBot, and you could also check me out on the D&D Club's channel every Saturday. Not this week, however, but following next week. Tune in 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. to check out the Grain Lens, where myself and a bunch of awesome players, such as Torch Seer and Fatal, who are in the chat, come check us out. Where
Brian.
can we find Brian?
Yeah.
You can find my link tree down there at rpgandco.com. Best place to find me is Instagram at RPG&Co. And yeah.
And you can find me, Jason, at TTRPG Academy in a fetal position underneath my table, sucking my thumb and wondering where all the daylight has gone. Yeah, my link tree, TTRPG Academy. You can find all of our Twitter, our link tree, Instagram, all of our Facebook stuff over there. Come hang out. If you want to learn how to play the game, head on over to the Academy. It's lots of fun.
What's the beautiful sign off, Jason?
Oh,
It's got to bring a tear to our eye.
no, it's going to be my classic because I do believe in my classic.
Do it.
Be safe, be kind, play a game. It's good for your mental health. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.